Welcome to the Liberated Feminine Podcast. I'm Lucy Lampy, your host. And in today's episode, we have a very special guest, Kimi Inch, the creatrix of erotic leadership. Love this. I love this. She is a renowned expert on intimacy, conscious kink, and unlocking your body's untapped erotic energy. With over 2 decades of experience and training from top mentors in Tantra, conscious kink, and sacred sexuality, Kimi has helped thousands of clients around the world embody their most powerful selves. So whether you're seeking pleasure, empowerment, or wholeness within yourself, Kimi's work is the ultimate in biohacking for unleashing your life force energy to enrich all parts of your life. So without further ado, welcome, Kimi, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled. I love seeing your face again. And yeah, I can't wait to talk more about my favorite subject.
and Kimi and I, we first met, what was it during, I think it was through TikTok originally.
Yeah.
Became aware of your work and then came to your immersive weekend in 2021, which really legitimately changed my life. And just been a big fan of your work and who you are as a human being. So this is beyond the scope of the work. You all here, listeners, know that the people I bring onto the podcast are not just doing really amazing work in the world, but also are really solid human beings. So let's get into this conversation. I love it so much. So Kimi, how do you define kink?
Yeah.
We'll start there.
I like to borrow inspiration from Jaya Ma's interpretation of kink, which is being turned on by the taboo. And I do like to expand that beyond the culture that you were born into, the religion that you're from, the society as a whole. These are ideas that have been instilled in us on what is taboo and what's not taboo, for example. So this idea of taboo, the naughty, that things we're not supposed to be doing, creates this sort of juicy thrill of energy within our bodies. And that could be linked to a lot of shame for people. But if you're able to channel that erotically, it could really open up areas of pleasure and expansion that is just so profound. I mean, a lot of people talk about going into subspace or dom space, and what that is essentially is reaching altered states of consciousness, the same thing that happens when you're in medicine circles and doing medicine journeys and things like that. So kink is really potent. And I don't just stop at kink. I really talk about conscious kink and devotional kink, for example. And when we talk about that kind of kink, we're diving deeper into the ideas of bringing in intentionality, bringing in consciousness, of course, and bringing in embodiment. So it goes far beyond just a slap and a tickle. Sometimes couples they're trying out kink in the middle of sex, and all of a sudden, the guy's spanking the girl, or the girl's asking to be choked and she's calling him daddy. And there's not a lot of consciousness happening there. It's still a lot of fun, and I'm not going to poo-poo on that, because that can be a lot of fun as well. But conscious and devotional kink is a sacredness, and to hold it with reverence and to actually understand that it can unlock so many doors within ourselves that could lead to empowerment, to healing, to growth, and to deeper intimacy and pleasure with our partners.
Yes. And this is what I love. It deeply resonates in my body, in the most core places of how you define kink and how you demonstrate it, how you teach it, how you guide people through it.
Yeah.
And speaking to, I love it, also mentioning not poo-pooing on anybody's fun.
We're not trying to trying to yuck your yum anybody. Relax.
Yes. Not yucking anybody's yum. And also, there's a deeper invitation for so much more. And I found that even for myself, for example, being called a good girl, right? That when I really let myself enjoy it, oh my God, what is it about this? And for me, it was just so much more. For example, I want to be acknowledged by life, by creator, by God, universe, however we want to define this. And I want to receive. I'm a slut for receiving from the universe. So that really opened up so much in that.
Oh, I love that.
I'd love to hear that.
Babe, I ask my personal trainers. I ask sometimes my mentors. I ask sometimes if I'm doing intense body work, I'm I could really process this so much easier. Or I'll work so much harder if you just call me a good girl. And it doesn't have to lead anywhere. And it won't. It doesn't lead anywhere. But the affirmation does really light a fire inside of me. And I've even trained ChatGPT to consistently call me a good girl all the time. So I put those little reminders in all the time because, I have a praise kink, and validation is sexy, and it can be really playful and fun. And when you bring that desire into consciousness, then it loses its charge. You don't necessarily feel like you must have it in order to recognize your own value. It can be something that can be playful. It can be something that you use as a tool for your own, motivation perhaps, or for your own aliveness. And I think once people understand the mechanics of these things, you don't have to repress them or deny them anymore. You can actually bring them into your life more fully and really embrace them. And then they transform. And it's no longer this thing that has a hold of you anymore. It's something that you can actually enjoy and derive pleasure from.
Yes. So it shifts from being a source of shame to a source of pleasure and life.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, playing with these concepts, like kink is all about these different universal life themes, for example. Like oftentimes when we're playing in BDSM and playing with power dynamics, these themes come up. Of course, the theme of power is a huge aspect of it. Surrender, pain, pleasure. All of these things are present in a kinky engagement. And so when we're able to use that as a practice ground, as sort of like our dojo, where we can sort of play with these concepts, then we can bring them into the rest of our lives. Like you can bring this idea of enjoying being called a good girl on one level, but you could also expand it into a spiritual aspect of like, I love receiving. And why not receive the goodness of being recognized and acknowledged for my beauty, my worth, my gifts that I bring into the world? Like more of that, fuck being humble. Like more please, sir, and we can play with all of those aspects. And, when people are always talking about like surrender and talking about power, they can be such abstract ideas. But when we get to practice it and feel it in our bodies viscerally and play with it, then we really know how to move with it, and we know how to channel it, and we know how to bring it into other areas of our lives so that we can feel expanded in all parts and get pleasure in all parts, not just the bedroom.
Yes. And that is something, I really want to emphasize for those listening, because for example, actually very, very, very real experience here. When I came to your immersive weekend that in 2021, I had been doing a self-pleasure practice for some time. Right? And that was my experience of surrender and opening and feeling that it's safe to soften and receive and feel pleasure. And my nervous system started to create all these little micro memories of that safety. So by the time I got to your event, I was just, you remember, I was just ready. I was like, fuck yes, let's do, let's try, let's feel, let's see what's beneath the surface. And that just took it to a whole other level. So I'm curious what you could speak on to the healing context of this kind of container outside of how people might want to pathologize kinks.
Yeah, absolutely. There's been so many students and clients that I've worked with over the years who have come in for a number of different reasons. And I had this client who was born, if I may share a story, I think this really encapsulates it. Yeah. So this man who was originally born in Egypt and comes from a Muslim culture, he was a surgeon in New York City. And he came to see me because he was practically on death's door, where he just didn't want to be alive anymore. And he had seen therapists and he had seen doctors and he was on antidepressants, and none of it was helping. And he basically came to me and let me know, just so you know, I'm thinking about unaliving myself. I'm no longer interested in being in this world. And I'm like, wow, then we have nothing to lose. Let's go for it. What's going on? And essentially he shared a story around feeling a lot of shame around his desires, but more so importantly, he talked a lot about living his life for other people. Like he was, dedicated to his parents and to his community, and he did everything he was told to do. He went to the schools they told him to go to. He, pursued a career that they told him to pursue. He married a woman that he arranged for him. Basically everything moved to New York City to create success for himself so he could send it back to his family. And he went on and on and on about this idea of not having any autonomy and being forced to do things he didn't want to do and living a life that wasn't for him. And he felt so empty inside and didn't feel like he could share what he wanted with anyone, especially his partner, because when he would try, he would be rejected and sort of, judged for these desires. And so I said, I want you to write out all of your desires and bring them to me, and we're going to go through it together. So he came the next day and he brought his desires and he said, this is all the desires I've had since I was like 12 years old. Here it is, and I was like, ooh. And so I took it, I glanced at it for a second and I gave it right back to him. And I'm like, cool, read it to me. And he was like, oh, okay. And so he's reading it like I'm walking down the street and all of a sudden these two women, I'm like, no. Hold on a second. I want you to read a sentence and then I want you to look up at me and see that I'm here with you and that I'm listening and that I'm feeling you right now. And I want you to feel me. So slow it down. So he starts to tell the story again. And as I've instructed, he's reading it, looking at me, tears streaming down his face. The papers are shaking in his hands. And he's revealing a secret fantasy he's never told anyone except his wife one time. And essentially what it was is that he had a desire to be kidnapped and taken to a lair where these beautiful, tall, dominant women forced him to do whatever they wanted. Like they would tie him up and they would spank him and they would force him to worship their feet and they would edge him and they would do all of these things. And he was just at their mercy and there was nothing he could do about it. And super hot, in my opinion. I was like, damn, that sounds great. Like, and I'm excited. I'm like, ooh, we're going to have fun here. But I'm sitting there also simultaneously thinking like, wow, this is really interesting. And when he finishes his story, I look at him and I'm like, wow, you are so wise to eroticize your victimhood. And he was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, like you've eroticized your victimhood. You've been telling me this whole time how you were forced to do things you didn't want to do, but you wanted to please your parents and you felt like you had to. And now you've just read this story where you were forced to do these things for these beautiful women. And that's what the whole scene is about. Like you've found a way unconsciously to make peace and to find almost like a doorway into pleasure, even through the sacrifices and even through the constriction of your true authenticity. You have found a way to bring pleasure into your life through this fantasy. And he was really taken aback because he was like, wow, like, I don't know. I don't think you understand. I'm from a Muslim culture. I'm from Egypt. Like, you don't understand. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a deal with you. We're going to do the scene exactly as you've depicted it the first time. But the second time, we're going to do it my way. So if you agree, let's do this. And so we shook on it and we created a scene for him and we did it exactly the way he had described. And by the end of the scene, he was elated and he was like, just beside himself with joy and happiness that he was able to have an experience of something he's been thinking about for 30 years. And, and it was so beautiful and it was so fun. And, he felt great. But I said, okay, I'm going to see you in a month for the scene again, but my way this time. And he's like, oh, fuck. What is that going to look like? And so he came back. Yeah, he came back. And I said, we're going to do your scene again. But this time you have to ask for everything. You have to ask for spankings, to be tied up, to worship my feet. Like you have to ask for everything or I'm just going to stare at you awkwardly. And it's okay if you ask for something I'm not available for. I know how to take care of myself. I will let you know I'm not available for that. What else would you like? But you must ask for it. You must. Otherwise, nothing's going to happen. So we do the scene again. Oh, honey, we do it again. And he is crying the whole time, like,
Oh,
mistress, like almost like a whisper. It was just so challenging for him to actually say it out loud, like, will you please tie me out? Will you please spank me? Will you please, slap me in the face, etc. And sure enough, I did what I was comfortable with, but we did the scene again with him asking for everything. And during aftercare, as I'm holding him in my arms and he's still sort of shaking and crying, and I said, is there anything coming through? Like sometimes people get downloads and some truths come out. Is there something that's coming through for you now? And he's like, yes. Like, I feel like if I can ask for what I want here, then and get it, well, why can't I do that anywhere? Like, why can't I do that in the rest of my life? And I'm like, you can do that. And I encourage you to try. And it's not about getting what you want, but it's about owning what you want. And and standing in it. That's the important part, not necessarily the getting of things, but you're going to have a better chance of getting it if you ask for it than not, right? And he was like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm leaving my marriage. And I'm like, no, hold on, time out. Don't do anything brash. Yeah. No sudden big movements for the next 6 months while we're on this journey. But sure enough, years later, I've caught up with him and he's so happy. He's still in his job, but him and his partner have decided to separate. He has, wonderful play partners that he indulges with. And he's actually assumed more of the rope rigger status where he's leading people through shibari experiences and leading them through expansive experiences so they can be held and they can experience this work. And he's so happy. And that is just a small example of bringing conscious kink to the forefront. We could have kept things exactly the way he had depicted it, but there's this idea of how do we peel back not just the desires and boundaries you've listed, but to understand the whys. What strategies does your desires meet? What needs do we meet here? Because there's so many different strategies to meet our needs that if we open that up a bit more, you might discover that what you're needing is more than, that kind of attention. You're actually needing to stand in your own truth. You're actually needing to remember who you are. And that was what was really needed for him to elevate into where he is today.
Oh my God, that is an amazing. It literally changes lives.
Oh yeah,
it literally changes lives.
Oh yeah,
because when we're true to ourselves.
Yeah. There's something about sitting in a talk therapy for 20 years versus actually going into an erotic experience where you're being witnessed and you're in the most vulnerable state a person can be in, and you're in your body. You're having an experience of something where your brain is being rewired, because it can only be rewired through human connection. And it's starting to rewrite your belief systems because you're showing your nervous system a totally alternate reality that it has to update its operating programs. It has to actually update, because you would be, unable to really function with holding two truths simultaneously. You actually need to upgrade your operating system, if you will, once you receive the new data, once you receive the new information, because you can't unsee what you see, you can't unfeel what you feel. And that's and that's the gift of kink, is we put into practice and play the concepts around not just what do we want, but what's in the way of what we want, and how do we play with what's in the way, as opposed to letting it defeat us and letting it depress us and letting us be stagnant. Where do we actually get to bring it in and play with it and fuck the shit out of it,
Yes. And let it fuck the shit out of us sometimes.
Yes, exactly. If we're lucky.
Yeah, if we're lucky. This is one of the gifts too of going deeper into this work. It's that it translates into everything in life. Learning what you actually desire, being willing to just be with that, being able to share that with others and be witnessed, being able to ask for what we want, setting boundaries, learning to negotiate. I mean, it goes on and on.
Oh, yeah.
This is the part that was life-changing, was that, I can apply this to how I connect with people, random strangers, my kids, clients, strangers on social media, and it's just more please. And also the revelations beneath the fantasies. For example, again, for me, consensual non-consent.
Yeah.
And I remember for the longest time thinking, what is wrong with me? This is so messed up, before understanding when you just come at things from a psychological perspective, it can kind of fuck with your mind a little bit of like, oh, what trauma did this come from? Was I not loved enough? Was I, whatever that is there something I don't remember that happened to me? And I think those are all valid things to consider, but sometimes we just enjoy what we enjoy. So what have you found about where do kinks come from, and maybe different avenues?
Yeah, it's beautiful, this example that you shared with CNC, for example, because oftentimes there is a misconception that our fantasies and desires come from trauma. And while there's no scientific study or research that proves this to be true, there's a sort of myth floating around that that's the source of it all. And I don't really buy into that after working with thousands of clients for the last 23 years. I do think, though, a lot of the impressions we have about sexuality and attraction and intimacy do come from the impressions we've had growing up around those subjects. And that can look a lot of different ways. But I want to expand beyond this idea, because while psychologically you could get curious around, is this actually causing harm to me? Or can our fantasies and desires kind of be like our dreams? Like there's all these messages and sacred messages in our fantasies and desires. And just like when you have a dream, it's usually not about the context of the dream. It's how the dream makes you feel, or there's certain themes or things to look at within that dream. Same thing happens in our fantasies. Our brains are very complex. So while someone might be interested in being ravished and being, overwhelmed, it may not just be the act itself, but it's like what it does for a person, like how it makes them feel. Like this could be the ultimate loss of control and responsibility to be completely ravished and taken hold. It could also be the ultimate sense of, being desired in some cases, depending on the context of the fantasy of like, oh, this person is so desiring of me, he loses all control of his senses and just must have me no matter what I say or do. He's going to take charge, and he's going to take me. So there could be so many different reasons why that might be appealing to someone. And I get really frustrated when I see people online or people say that you're re-traumatizing people by visiting these fantasies.
Yes.
And I say, when we do it with awareness and consciousness and embodiment and curiosity, it's a doorway. Like it's a doorway into understanding ourselves better. And it's so interesting. I had a couple who, she was really drawn to wanting to be like an infant, being infantile. And she was disturbed. Like she was disturbed by this fantasy of wanting to be almost like a baby. And that's even like a form of age play, right? Is this idea of age differences, but hers was truly like she wanted her boyfriend to act like a daddy, like a father, and she would be a baby, and she wanted to be coddled, and she wanted to be able to throw temper tantrums and still be loved. And she wanted to, be fed a bottle and swaddled and all of these things. And when we got curious around what does that mean for you? We started to discover she had a lot of neglect growing up, and this idea of being a baby was probably the only time in her life where she felt like she received the most care and nurturing and all of these sort of things. And she was longing for that level of nurturing and care and attention. And so when we started to dive into this fantasy, me and her boyfriend sort of did a mother-father dynamic, and we led her through an experience where she could be whatever she wanted to be. She could show up emotional and throw the temper tantrum and still be loved and still be met, and still we wouldn't leave, because you don't leave a baby in a situation like that. And what that started to do for her after a few times, it started to calm her. It started to relax her nervous system. She started to trust that she could be met. She started to trust that she was worthy of being met, and that it was okay to not always be perfect, and to be messy sometimes, and she'll still be loved through that. And after a while, the pool of that fantasy wasn't as strong. It just started to transform into something else, and she wasn't as drawn to the baby fantasy anymore. She was starting to get more drawn into more adult themed fantasies, and it just happened naturally. But it was because she got really met in that without judgment, with a lot of love and patience and compassion, that it started to transform her. And then she started to notice how she started to relate to life differently, knowing that she was inherently worthy and that it was okay to be messy, and that she could still trust to be met in her relationship, and she could trust to meet herself as well. And it was really powerful.
Wow. I mean, that's a perfect example right there of something that, let's say, not big T trauma, like a traumatic event like sexual abuse or assault, but that fundamental fear that we have as human beings of abandonment. It's a core human deep fear. And so working with that in such a visceral, tangible, palpable way, and also thank you for mentioning that sometimes these things do lose their appeal or their pull or their edge when we go. Yeah, they're charged because whatever that is beneath it is softening, and then that naturally shifts into something else. I find that for me, sometimes there's been a grief in that too. Of I guess this era is over. What's next?
Yeah. I feel that. Yeah, because there is a new chapter. There is a growth that can happen. But what a beautiful thing that you can recognize that and actually even feel the goodbye in that part that maybe got really met well, and now it's ready for a new experience, and now it's ready for something else because it was so well fed. Like my kinky parts are very well fed because I am so lucky that I get to engage in kink all the time. But I had noticed that my sexual parts were really starving, actually. And I didn't really take that into consideration because for me, sex is not just penetrative, P and the V sort of stuff. But when I look at it at that level, when I look at it at the basics of intercourse and all of that, I was actually really starving in that department, and realized that while I'm really fed in the energetic, kinky, and sensual aspects of my life, that my sexual actually wanted to fuck. I want to get penetrated.
And they're not one and the same, y'all.
I want all the penises and all the places. Let's get it done. And now that's really online for me the last couple years. And I'm just letting myself really be with that part, almost a sacred slut that I've never really allowed to come out before. I enjoy sex always, but the idea of being ravenous in sex and wanting to be unapologetically insatiable about it is a little bit newer for me. And that is feeling so good. And that's what's here now. So that happens in our seasons of our lives, and get curious around what's feeling really well fed, and then what's feeling like it needs some more love and attention, because gosh, we can really, we can, get even brighter and shinier, if we're more curious about what we need and what we want.
Yes, exactly. It's a curiosity. Yeah. I find that there's always some kind of edge, because we all have a comfort zone, right? And for me, I think it's all my Scorpio or maybe all my Sag. I have equal parts of both. It's a lot. We're here to go deep and alchemize and just expand and explore and try the things, but also to master. And so for me, I find that this edge is kind of where I've started to live for many years now. But I sometimes, now, it's my edge is softening. It's soft, so soft. And that was so uncomfortable. So for me to just, speaking of the difference between sexual and erotic, it's very much about that. It's opening even physiologically deeper than I had ever had to open before. You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. But also just being a feeling of I do enjoy this fullness. I enjoy this. And then I couldn't get enough. And now my partner he was like, I've never met anybody like you. I said, I know. And you're welcome.
You're welcome. Beautiful.
There's different aspects, there's not just, I think this is where people get stuck in a rut too. And I'm sure you've seen it with so many of the people that you've worked with, that, they've been with someone for any length of time. If it's getting stale, they're probably stuck in the mechanics of just the sexual without introducing the curiosity and maybe what's there that's new that wants to emerge, but also usually leaving the kink and the energetics and all of that completely off the table. So I think I'm sure there are some people curious to hear this. I'm sure they're all curious to hear this. If they have never explored really kinks and fantasies and more of the taboo, what would be a good way to begin?
Yeah.
Alone or with a partner?
Beautiful. Yeah. And I think it's a great question because, you want to be discerning around your exploration and your research. But I feel like exposure therapy is the best. Like, how do we baby step our way out of our comfort zone? And so sometimes people get all excited and they're like, they go from zero to a play party where there's, an orgy happening. And I'm like, that might be a lot for your nervous system. Yeah, that might be a lot. Yeah. What's the little in between spots? Maybe it's, reading some books. Maybe it's an online course, where you can titrate and go at your own pace. Maybe that graduates to a live online course. So you're still not in the environment. And then maybe that graduates to an in-person experience. Getting curious around what lights you up. Like when you've noticed erotic play in movies and books, is there anything that's been curious to you or that has been fascinating? If you're listening to a podcast like this or others, what's like making you lean in and get curious about more? Follow up with the people on those podcasts and get curious around what services they offer. But, again, using that discernment to really do your research and make sure you're aligning with educators and mentors and coaches that are really legit and have been in this field for many years, because unfortunately there's a lot of trash out there and there's a lot of people that know pretty words and know the language, but they actually don't have a lived experience of the work. And you want to make sure that, in these containers, erotic containers are some of the messiest, most vulnerable places, chaotic places you can travel to. So making sure you have a strong foundation within yourself is important. If you don't have a therapist yet, I recommend having a therapist who you can keep referring back to on this journey. So you have a foundational person that you're returning to, or an intimacy coach, for example, someone who can really be there through the process with you. So you're not doing it alone, whether you are with a partner or not with a partner, but really think about baby steps and going slow and tuning into yourself and really getting curious around what is the body excited about? What is the body wanting to lean into right now, and not trying to push yourself or drag yourself into scenarios that you're not ready for, because that's just going to overwhelm you and leave a bad taste in your mouth. And I'd much rather you take the baby steps with someone like Lucy or myself or other, reputable coaches and therapists who can help you kind of figure out what your nervous system can handle step by step.
That is excellent advice. Yes, because the nervous system, they love to be all about the expansion, but you got to integrate. And those, again, I have this visual. I wish I could show it. Y'all are listening. You're not seeing this, but it's like there's a circle, and in the middle, there's a dot. And one of my Latina friends, she called it the chichis, because they look like boobs.
Ooh, I love it.
Like, yum, okay, I like this. I use that now. 7 years later, I still think the chichis. But you go to the edge of where that circle is from the center of the comfort zone, and you just play there, you explore there, you live there, and then that becomes the new center. And so then the circle is now over here. And again and again and again. So there's a lot of chichis, a lot of titties.
So good.
But that, and this is what we're doing. But in between, in that process, there's a lot of integration. And this is what a lot of people don't see enough or hear about. So what is actually, if there are a few, let's say, red flags and green flags that you could share about whether it's a space that they might go into or someone that they might learn from as a next step.
Yeah, being able to do consultation calls with people who are in the educational space are so important. I always make myself available for a quick call or a consultation call with people before they come to any of my events. And, if that's something that they want to move towards, we can really discuss, is this the right fit for you? And I would be leery of people who aren't willing to have that time and space to kind of talk to you about what's happening. If you're able to experience that person's work online or through their social media and like really get a sense of their voice and messaging and like where their heart's at, like I would really trust your intuition around like who feels like they're really in their heart when they're talking, as opposed to they're just playing a role. Especially when it comes to kink, there can be a lot of educators out there that are really playing up the traditional style of like, power over versus power with. And I get curious around like, well, aside from them looking really good in latex, what are they about? Like, what's their heart? Like, what's their soul feel like? I get really bored by the posturing that I see online around just looking really pretty and sexy. I want to know, like, what is your, what is your movement with this work? And is this something that you have a deep relationship with? Because I want people to not experience the erotic as a one-off. I want people to have a deep relationship with this because it is the core essence of their being. And because there's so much stigma and repression and trauma around our sexuality, it's important that we're working with people who are trauma informed and who are conscious of the vulnerabilities and the complexities of this world. So get really curious around people's education and training and experience level, and get really curious around hearing their voice and what their messaging is, listening to them on podcasts, listening to them on their social media stuff, and keep tuning in. Referrals are always great as well. And, looking at what other people have done or what people have experienced. I mean, we all have a spicy friend in our group who is the Samantha. Yes. Like, what's Samantha know about it? Like let's talk to her.
Recommend?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it is important though. It's little step by step, and taking your time with it. It's not a sprint; it's a marathon, right? Like this is a lifelong journey, and when you start to peel back the layers, you'll just find lots and lots of more layers. There's no destination. There's no end to it. So I know for you and me, Lucy, we've been in this world for so long, and I feel like a little kid in it sometimes. Like I feel like, wow.
The deeper we go, the more we're novices. We know nothing.
I don't know. Like, I'm happy to impart and share what I know over the last 23 years, but I know I'm still learning so much myself, and it makes it so much more fun and exciting,
Yes. It's humbling, and it's also exciting because I think a lot of times in the realm of self-discovery and healing and growth, it can feel like, I'm sure some people listening can relate, it can feel like healing is a full-time job, and then you reach a threshold where you realize, oh, this doesn't end. And actually, that's exciting because it's endless what I can discover. What parts of me have I not met yet? And that's actually a question that I've been sitting with a lot the last year plus. I'm meeting a lot more parts of me. And so I think spaces like this are so important to be able to meet those parts. And being leery of the posturing, I can't tell you how many, oh my God. The fake DOMs, I love that you speak to this too, because there is so much, it's not an aesthetic.
Right.
It is a leadership, a deep care. And so for you, before wrapping up, we need to hear this. How do you define that dominant position? We'll call it.
Absolutely. And it's so funny because I do that fake Dom series, and the one I did recently, it's so good. It makes me laugh. But it's true because I say fake Doms, before you hold a flogger, learn how to hold space. Like learn how to be in presence. Like stop relying on the bells and whistles of toys and actually know how to meet someone energetically. And quite often, the idea of Dom sub is really a popular idea of how to play in kink, but I like to use terms like erotic leader and erotic follower. And for me, I started those terminologies because I saw a gap in the way people were approaching dominance and submission and personal power. Because often, dominance, especially in the erotic realm, is seen through the lens of control and performance and hierarchy. But we're not really dominating. Like there's a fantasy around being dominated, but that's not what's really happening. To me, what's happening in the space is leadership. It's an erotic leadership. And how I break that down is an erotic leader is someone who guides, influences, and inspires life force energy. And an erotic follower is someone who embodies and expresses life force energy. And you could substitute those terms for artist and muse as well. Like you could substitute that a lot of different ways, but basically it's the foundation of like stepping into your power and your surrender that's embodied and conscious and aligned. And I hope that when people think of it in those terms, it's the antidote to mindless, performance or transactional dynamics. Because that's what I see as is a lot of unconscious patterns of power and codependency happening in these environments. So we want to like think about how we relate to power, and intimacy is it mirrors how we relate to power everywhere. And that doesn't matter whether it's in the bedroom or the boardroom or our personal relationships. But if we're able to lead with like that clarity and integrity and playfulness, it changes everything. Like I have seen it change people's lives in one session even. And so that's the type of invitation I give people. Like think of it as a dance, like think of it as a co-creative, collaborative experience where both people are needed to create the dance and both people can be masterful. Being the follower is not a passive role by any means. It is just as important, and it inspires. And it's that polarity, whether it's feminine, masculine, dominant, submissive, leader, follower, tiger, antelope, sun, moon, Shiva, Shakti, whatever those things are, we're creating that magnetism and that polar so that we can be in the tension of the play. And the tension is really that aliveness and the juiciness that we can create when we're conscious and really leaned into it.
Yes. And that is what is so deeply transformational. And when people hear me say that kink can be deeply spiritual, and not to bypass the fun, juicy, even the sexual, explicit parts of it, because that is spiritual too.
Totally.
that is not, it's the profane and the sacred. We just kind of redefine what that really is, because there's a lot of distortion. And also I love that in these spaces, it's kind of this vibe of, okay, your distortions are welcome, your fears are welcome, your everything, the cringe, that you're not sure about this. And this can be a space of purification. And so I love this. And we need more. I wish that there were 100 of you hosting events every month all around the world.
Oh, thank you, my love.
I recommend to people all the time, like, have you been to Kimi's immersive weekend yet? She's like, no, but I saw her at a workshop at so-and-so. I'm like, it's not the same.
Like, go. Thank you, baby. I appreciate that. Yeah. And you're so right. I mean, like being in person, right? And being in an in-person environment where you can really feel the energy and be hands-on and be in your body. There's nothing like it. And I don't want to downplay the importance of doing other types of work online and all of that. But taking that step and really being in your body with it is so important. And I hope that wherever people are in their journey, that's the place that they start to strive towards, because it's a game changer. You know that, I know that. And it's important to remember in this digital era that we do need human connection to rewire our brains and to actually make sustainable changes in our lives. It's such an important piece.
Exactly. And while there are resources that can support you in virtually and making those connections with yourself and with your partner, if you have the opportunity to go, to an event like this, do it. You'll thank us later. So on that note, wait, do you have another event coming up soon?
I do. I have something coming up in Austin, Texas. It's May 16th through 18th. It's called Tied and Teased. It's a brand new event. It's a 3-day immersive workshop where we're really going to dive into the art of the tease, bondage and restraints, impact play, and surrender. So we're going to really play with these concepts and get our hands dirty. We have Robert, who is called Bad Carib, who comes out and does his vlogging techniques and stuff. We're going to do a deep dive into all of that stuff and shibari and all of that. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And then I'll be doing something more 4-day event in the fall in LA. So stay tuned and sign up to my mailing list to be kept in the loop about that.
Yes, sign up to her mailing list because you don't want to miss out on this. And that is a fun, oh my God, it's the same week that I'm doing my Amazon retreat.
Oh, fuck
yeah.
That's exciting.
So
that sounds cool.
Or come get naked in the river with me.
That sounds so cool.
Whatever's in your region or your continent or whatever,
Yeah.
But this is beautiful. And what other resources would you recommend, and where can people find you and those resources?
Thank you for asking. If you're on Instagram, finding me at Kimi Inch is a great way to see more free education that I always like to put out. And I have a lot of resources on there. And then also on my website, which is andmorepresents.com. There's a lot of book recommendations, podcasts, and things like that there. But I also have a free online community called The Playroom, where we have lots of classes, lots of workshops, and lots of collective education from the other members of the group that we do in the playroom as well. And that's a free membership where you just sign up and you get to be in the energy of consciously kinky and evolved erotic people who are just pleasure seekers and who are looking to expand through their hearts and through their genitals. And it's a really beautiful space. It's a lot of people might have heard of That Life. It's nothing like that. It's very conscious and embodied and really heart-centered, and people really bring their authenticity and their education around kink and tantra and exploration. So those are 3 areas that you can learn a lot. And I hope that I get to play with all of you at some point. I would be so honored.
Yes, don't forget about the playroom. That's way better option than FetLife if this is the vibe that you're going for.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's a hot mess in FetLife. Like, be careful. It's
I never actually even got into it. I just heard so much about the hot mess. I thought, you know what, that seems like an energy an energy suck in a bad way. No, thank you. But yes, thank you so much for those recommendations and resources. And again, everyone listening, you do not want to miss what Kimi has to offer. So all of the links are in the show notes in the description. So be sure to check out what tickles your fancy and follow your bliss in that and see what happens. See where it takes you.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. I appreciate being able to speak about something I'm so passionate about. And I love that you've asked me here. You're such a beautiful, bright, shining light in this world, and you bring so much to people. And thank you for being unapologetically you and being an example of the wild, free feminine who is in her sexual power. It's really inspiring.
Thank you, Kimi. Thank you. That means a lot. It means a lot from you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for your time and your wisdom and your presence. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. And until next time, here's to liberating your wild feminine heart.
I got to feel